Have you ever seen a picture that just stops you in your tracks? One that pulls you into a moment in time, making you feel the mud, hear the chaos, and sense the history being made? The image we're looking at today does exactly that. It's a cinematic window into World War I, a conflict that forever changed the world and America's place in it. We see them, the American soldiers nicknamed doughboys. They're pushing forward through a landscape torn apart by war. The trenches, carved into the earth, are rivers of mud. The sky above is a mixture of smoke and a strange, almost beautiful golden light, a stark contrast to the grim reality on the ground. Explosions bloom in the distance like deadly flowers. Look closely at their faces. You can see the grit, the exhaustion, but most of all you see unwavering determination. These weren't just soldiers. They were farm boys, factory workers, and students, men from every corner of a nation that, until recently, had tried to stay out of this devastating European war. And right there, in the middle of it all, one soldier raises the American flag. It's not a pristine, ceremonial flag. It's likely tattered and stained, but it's held high, a powerful symbol of defiance and national pride. In this moment of chaos, that flag represents everything they were fighting for, a beacon of their identity so far from home. To understand why this moment is so significant, we need to rewind a bit. When World War I erupted in 1914, America's official stance was neutrality. President Woodrow Wilson, reflecting the mood of the country, urged his fellow citizens to be impartial in thought as well as in action. The war was seen as a European problem, a tangled web of old-world alliances and imperial ambitions that had little to do with the United States. For nearly 3 years, America watched from the sidelines. The economy boomed as the U.S. supplied the Allied powers, Britain, France, and Russia, with weapons, food, and loans. But staying out of the fight became increasingly difficult. Germany's campaign of unrestricted submarine warfare was a major turning point. German U-boats, or submarines, began sinking not just military vessels but also civilian and merchant ships without warning. The sinking of the British passenger liner Lusitania in 1915, which killed over 1,100 people, including 128 Americans, sparked outrage in the United States. Public opinion began to shift. The final straw was the Zimmermann telegram in early 1917. British intelligence intercepted and decoded a secret message from Germany to Mexico, proposing a military alliance against the United States if America entered the war. Germany promised Mexico the return of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. When this was made public, the American people were furious. The threat was no longer an ocean away. It was at their doorstep. On April 6, 1917, Congress declared war on Germany. President Wilson, who had won re-election on the slogan, "He kept us out of war," now famously declared that the world must be made safe for democracy. America was going over there. Mobilizing for a war of this scale was a monumental task. The U.S. Army was relatively small, but the Selective Service Act was passed, initiating a draft. Millions of American men were called to serve. They went through rapid training, learning the brutal realities of trench warfare, gas attacks, and machine guns. When the American Expeditionary Forces, or AEF, led by General John J. Pershing, began arriving in Europe in large numbers in 1918, they were a welcome sight for the exhausted Allied forces. The war had been a bloody stalemate for years. The French and British were battered and demoralized. The arrival of these fresh, energetic American troops, the doughboys, injected a new sense of hope and vitality into the Allied cause. The term doughboy itself has a few origin stories. Some say it came from the large brass buttons on their uniforms that looked like doughy dumplings. Others suggest it dates back to the Mexican-American War, where infantrymen covered in dust looked like they were coated in flour or adobe dough. The name stuck, becoming a fond nickname for the American infantrymen of World War I. Now, let's go back to our scene. The tanks you see rolling through the mud were a new and terrifying invention in this war. They were designed to break the deadlock of trench warfare, to cross no man's land and smash through barbed wire and machine gun nests. Early tanks were clumsy and unreliable, but they represented the mechanization of war, a sign of how technology was changing combat forever. And look up above the battlefield. spy planes soar through the smoky sky. World War I was the first major conflict to feature airplanes. Initially used for reconnaissance to spy on enemy positions, they soon evolved into fighters, engaging in dramatic dogfights in the sky. These pilots, or aces, became legendary heroes. For the soldiers in the trenches, the battle was now being fought on the ground and in the air. The American doughboys played a crucial role in the final year of the war. They fought with incredible bravery in key battles like Cantigny, Château-Thierry, and Below Wood in the Meuse-Argonne offensive, the largest and deadliest battle in American military history. Over 1.2 million American soldiers fought. They pushed through dense forests and heavily fortified German lines, enduring immense casualties, but ultimately helping to break the back of the German army. Their courage was legendary. The Germans, who had faced battle-hardened French and British troops for years, were often shocked by the Americans' aggressive, almost reckless, fighting style. These doughboys were determined to get the job done and go home. Now, let's look at the most symbolic element in this image. Faintly, through the smoke and haze, we see the silhouette of the Statue of Liberty. This is, of course, an artistic addition, not a literal one. The battlefield is in France, thousands of miles from New York Harbor. But its inclusion is incredibly powerful. For the soldiers, many of whom were immigrants or the sons of immigrants, the Statue of Liberty was the ultimate symbol of the home and the ideals they were defending. It represented freedom, opportunity, and the promise of a better life, the very things that stood in stark contrast to the imperial autocracies they were fighting against. That glowing silhouette is a symbol of hope. It's the why behind their sacrifice. It's the idea of America, a beacon shining through the darkest of times. The war finally ended on November 11, 1918, with the signing of the armistice. The doughboys had helped turn the tide and secure an Allied victory, but the cost was immense. Over 116,000 American soldiers lost their lives, and more than 200,000 were wounded. The Great War was supposed to be the war to end all wars, a hope that, tragically, would be shattered just 2 decades later. When the surviving doughboys returned home, they were greeted as heroes. Parades were held in their honor. But America itself had changed. The war had propelled the United States onto the world stage as a major global power. The nation's industrial might had been proven, and its political influence had grown immensely. The isolationism that had defined America for so long was beginning to fade, replaced by a new, more complex role in international affairs. This image, then, is more than just a depiction of a battle. It's a snapshot of a pivotal moment in American history. It captures the grit of the American soldier, the terrifying nature of modern warfare, and the rise of a nation. It shows us the moment when America stepped out of the shadows and onto the world stage, shouldering new responsibilities and facing a future filled with both promise and peril. The legacy of the doughboys and America's involvement in World War I is profound. It shaped the country's foreign policy for the next century. It led to social changes at home, including advancements for women's suffrage and labor rights. And it left an indelible mark on the American psyche, a story of sacrifice and heroism that continues to inspire us today. Every detail in this scene, the mud, the flag, the tanks, the planes, and that distant, glowing statue tells a piece of this larger story. It, as a tribute to the courage and determination of a generation of Americans who answered the call to serve in a foreign land, fighting for an ideal they carried in their hearts. They were the doughboys, and their legacy is woven into the very fabric of the modern world. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into a single, powerful image. History isn't just about dates and facts. It's about human stories, and pictures like this help us connect with those stories on a deeper level. If you enjoyed this video and want to explore more moments from history, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next journey into the past. We'll see you in the next one.